Mr. President, Madam Acting High Commissioner, Excellencies, at the outset, I reiterate Sri Lanka's unwavering commitment towards advancing, securing and protecting the human rights of our people and continuing our engagement with the Council in a spirit of cooperation and dialogue.
Sri Lankan Foreign Minister Ali Sabry told the 51st session of the Human Rights Council in Geneva that the government was committed to working with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights on improving human rights, but would object to any international judicial intervention that it sees as anti-constitutional.
In keeping with our commitment, notwithstanding our categorical rejection of Resolution 46-1, we have submitted Sri Lanka's detailed written response to the High Commissioner's report. Mr. President, we remain cognizant of and acutely sensitive to the events that have taken place in the recent past. The severe economic crisis emanating from factors both internal and external offer many lessons for all. We recall in this context the indivisibility of human rights as enshrined in the Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action. The government is extremely sensitive to the socio-economic hardship faced by our people and has initiated immediate multi-pronged measures to ensure their well-being through a provision of supplies essential to the life of the community. A staff-level agreement has been reached with the International Monetary Fund and discussions on debt restructuring are in progress. The government is in dialogue with the UN agencies as well as bilateral partners to protect the most vulnerable from the adverse impact of the crisis. The recent changes that have taken place bear testimony to our continued commitment to upholding our long-standing democratic principles and norms. The constitutional right to peacefully assembly and expression guaranteed the democratic space for our people to exercise their right. In this regard, transgressions of the law resulting in criminal and unlawful activity were addressed in accord with the law and the Constitution. In circumstances where such freedoms were abused by elements with vested interests to achieve undemocratic political ends. Mr. President, notwithstanding the severe constraints and challenges, Sri Lanka remains firmly committed to pursuing tangible progress in the protection of human rights and reconciliation through independent domestic institutions. Sri Lanka, along with several members of this Council, have opposed Resolution 46/1, fundamentally disagreeing with its legitimacy and objectives. We have consistently highlighted that the contents of the resolution, its operative paragraph 6 in particular, violates the sovereignty of the people of Sri Lanka and the principle of the UN Charter. Once again, we are compelled to categorically reject any follow-up measures to the resolution as well as the related recommendation and conclusion by the High Commissioner. Mr. President, it is observed that the High Commissioner's report makes extensive reference to economic crimes. Apart from the ambiguity of the term, it is a matter of concern that such reference exceeds the mandate of the OHCHR. In this context, we recall the paramount importance of adhering to UNGA Resolution 60/251, 48/141 and the IB package. The proposed 22nd amendments to the Constitution introduces several salient changes which would strengthen the democratic governance and independent oversight of key institutions and combat corruption, including through the constitutional recognition of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Mr. President, measures aimed at promoting reconciliation and human rights, if they are to be meaningful and sustainable, must be based on cooperation with the country concerned, be compatible with the aspiration of its people, and being consonant with its basic legal framework. We endeavour to establish a credible truth-seeking mechanism within the framework of the Constitution. The contours of a model that would suit the particular conditions of Sri Lanka are under discussion. The recommendation of the Presidential Commission of Inquiry have resulted in progressive amendment to the Prevention of Terrorism Act and the release of the detainees. Further recommendations are awaited. As we delivered on the onerous task of review and reform of the PTA this year, to further enhance human rights, we will replace the PTA with a more comprehensive national security legislation in accordance with the international best practices. The recent delisting of groups and individuals will provide further impetus for the constructive dialogue. We will continue to provide the necessary support and resources to strengthen the functioning of independent domestic mechanism, including the Office of the Missing Persons, the Office for Reparation, the Office for National Unity and Reconciliation, and the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka. The outreach to the overseas Sri Lankans, encompassing all communities, will be expanded through the establishment of an Office for Overseas Sri Lankans. Mr. President, in upholding human rights, we have benefited from the considerable expertise available with other countries as well as the United Nations. We will seek further advice and support on best practices as we proceed and as deemed necessary. Sri Lanka has maintained regular and constructive engagement with the UN treaty bodies, the special procedures and universal periodic review process. We look forward to proactively engage in the upcoming UPR 4th cycle. We have facilitated 2 visits by the Office of High Commissioner to Sri Lanka this year and provided unimpeded access. Mr. President, it is 13 years since the end of the conflict in Sri Lanka, and since then, a new generation has emerged with their own aspirations. While issues of reconciliation and accountability are being comprehensively addressed through a domestic process, it is time to reflect realistically on the trajectory of this resolution, which has continued on the agenda of the Council for over a decade, and to undertake a realistic assessment on whether it has benefited the people of Sri Lanka. There is a need to acknowledge actual progress on the ground and support Sri Lanka. The current challenges, though formidable, have provided us with a unique opportunity to work towards institutional changes for the betterment of our people. In a message of unity and reconciliation, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, in his inaugural address to the Parliament, said, I quote, "If we come together, we'll be able to invigorate the nation," unquote. Mr. President, the people of Sri Lanka remains steadfast and resilient while upholding their democratic values as one of Asia's oldest democracies. We are not hesitant to acknowledge our challenges and forge ahead with renewed vigor. While our immediate concern is economic recovery, advancing human rights of our people is of equal priority. We look to the genuine support and understanding of this Council as we proceed on this path.
For more latest news, subscribe to FTTV.